The October 15, 2018 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Please stand for the invocation. I'm invited to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Pruski will lead the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask everyone to bow their heads. We gather here today at the last legislative session to make decisions for our community, and we use our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and consequences of each matter. We ask this in your name for our community and fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pruski. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, once again. Madam Secretary, would you please read the ethics statement?
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council briefly on any subject that's not included on the printed agenda, and remarks limited to 2 minutes. There is a sign-up sheet. Ms. Linda Curry, Janice Hayes Williams, and Venus Williams. Please come forward. Come on down to the chairs right here and have a seat. Ms. Curry, you will begin. Please, to your name and address in 2 minutes.
Linda Curry, 707 Cottonwood, Severna Park, Maryland. I just came by to thank you guys. You have me as your representative on the roundtable, the BWI roundtable. We've done a lot of good things, but the FAA has made real sure that we didn't get what we wanted. They decided this is my last update, they decided in June they weren't talking to us because the State Attorney General filed a petition. They now have decided they are going to talk to us. So we'll have a meeting in December and find out what they have in mind for us. But in the meantime, since I probably won't be seeing all of you in one place again, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us. You've given us a lot of support. The items that you passed to help the BWI Roundtable, it really helped a lot to have that much support from our elected officials. And the many times you worked with us. You did work with us. You worked with Mary Reese on some documents. And you listened. You always listened. You let me come in and tell you my gripes with the FAA and how we were trying so hard to get things done. And it meant a lot. So I don't need 2 minutes. I just wanted to say that I wish you all the best of luck in wherever you may end up, wherever you may go, and just keep us all in mind. And if you're ever not busy on second Tuesday night of the month, you can come by and listen to the roundtable and how we talk with the FAA.
Thank you, Ms. Curry.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you.
Don't leave yet. We want to talk to you.
Thank you very much for your service, but also please communicate. I know that you are one of many that are in our county and our constituents that have been working on this. So it's Mary Reese and there's a number of others. Please communicate to them that we are appreciative of your work as a whole. Thank you.
And Ms. Curry, if I may add, thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. If I may add as well, I can remember years and years ago when I, somewhere in a federal parking area in D.C., I got a ticket, and I remember when the citation came in the mail, it said United States of America versus Michael Peruka. And I remember how that and I just was reminded of that because you've been up against the United States government here, Linda Curry, with and you are to be commended for for fighting that juggernaut.
Yeah, almost 2 years working on this, but we are making strides, and we're figuring out it. It's not going to take one key to fix this. It's going to take several keys, but we're starting to find those keys.
Well, thank you for your persistence, and you're to be commended for your work. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and thank you for the things you've helped me with on my community as well. Because I've not just been here for that, but I've been here for that too, thing too. And I was so nervous the first time I came up here and talked to you guys.
So were we.
But it has always gotten better, and I'm not nervous about talking to you anymore.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Janice Hayes Williams. Good evening.
Good evening, Anne Arundel County Council. I'm here tonight to thank you all for your service, some of you 4 years, some of you 8 years. In particular, Chris Trumbauer, I was here with you for your first council meeting, and I was determined to be here tonight for your last. And I want to thank you for making me a part of Team Trumbauer. And I just wanted to go through a few things that I shared with you. For example, our first budget, when your hair was all over your head and your tie was pulled to the side, you survived that. And in the middle of that budget, we had comp zoning, and I got great, I was so happy to see the residents of Crownsville in the kindergarten chairs when you let them know what comp zoning was about. I want to thank you for the work that you did to select the county executive when John Leopold was taken away. I want to thank you for your work for bringing Darrell Jones, his replacement, who is Pete Smith, who went back and ran again. I want to thank you for being able to go back and read The Council Has Lunch that was done by the council that described each and every one of you and who you were. I want to thank you for the Civil Rights Memorial across the street at Whitmore Park. I want to thank you for stormwater remediation, which some people call the rain tax. You suffered through the veto, and it came back around in your favor. I want to thank you for your 2014 re-election, where I lost 10 pounds working with you, hoping you will win again while doing the other work I was doing. I want to thank you for Whitmore Park. I want to thank you for being a supporter and serving the people of District 6. I want to thank all of you, even you, John Grasso, who was my councilman. I appreciate you all and the work that you've done, so I had to be here tonight. And I have something for you, Chris, so when you open this is so you can buy me a beer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Williams. Thank you very much. Venus Williams.
Hello, Council. Good evening. I want to speak to District 1, Councilman Pete Smith. Councilman Pete Smith, on behalf of Millstone Village HOA, we would like to say thank you for the 4 years that you served to our district, how you respond to the needs that we had in the community, and being a new community, that was really important. We really want to speak about how your constituent services, Linda and you, would always respond when the neighbors called, regardless of what time it was or what the issue might have been. And then when I had the personal opportunity to meet you and know we were both from Great Lakes states, I really appreciated coming to Anne Arundel County because I was new to this area. So you really put a nice, warm feeling in my heart for Anne Arundel County, and thank you. And thank you for the work that you have done, and to all the councils.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in the invitation for audience? Please come forward at this time. And this will be last call for invitation audience. Anybody else who wants to speak, please come down at this time.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Laura Kelman. I live in Cape St. Clair, Annapolis. Today I am here to speak about Mr. Grasso. I understand that this is his last county council meeting, but I want his behavior while holding this office to be entered into the record. Mr. Grasso has repeatedly insulted his own constituents. He has said that if you can't afford to live in Anne Arundel County, you should simply not live here. He has mocked people who donate plasma for money. That was the same month that Time magazine published a cover story about a public school teacher who donates plasma in order to pay her bills. He has suggested that this life-saving plasma donated by his constituents should not even be used because it can't be clean enough. Worse than that, he has stoked fear and hatred in the constituents who do support him. His social media is full of posts with racist sentiments. He has defended himself against charges of racism by saying that he is Italian, as though that in any way is comparable to being black. He says that there is no place in our country for Muslims. He has also shared things that are insulting to women, to immigrants, to Democrats. These statements should be offensive to any decent person in our community. I have personally received hostile and aggressive private direct messages from Mr. Grasso on Facebook after commenting on a county council vote. I know others who have received similar messages. This is not professional nor appropriate conduct. Luckily, none of us are easily intimidated. Each day our country is becoming more divided. Mr. Grasso would like to exploit these rifts and widen them in order to win his next election. I fervently hope that the people of Anne Arundel County have had enough of this hate and fear-mongering. This county, our Anne Arundel County, can be better than that, and we deserve better than that.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Ms. Johnson.
Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. Mr. Peruka admonished me the last time I was speaking, and so I certainly want to make an apology. There certainly are some wonderful inspectors who care about their jobs and who serve the people, and I was going to bring the affidavit of a man who had some supporting comments in my favor, but I was discombobulated and I failed to do so. And in addition to that, there are some really very fine inspectors that are out there. I do hope that as all of you, move on, or the 6 of you move on, that you will continue to remember that there are people in our community who need your help. You have knowledge, experience, understanding, and I am particularly concerned about the people, in that trailer park, the Dogwood Senior Mobile Home Park. We went through this before, and we need affordable housing in this county. And these are the perfect tenants you'd ever want to have in affordable housing. They invested in this. They paid for, or are paying for, their part of the mobile home that they're living in. Yes, they're paying rent for the land, but I certainly hope that you will reconsider whatever you can do to help these folks. Plus, the other thing is, when I was a child, and I knew, we had relatives who lived on farms. They always shook their fingers at the children and said, buy land. They're not making any more of that. Buy land. Well, next door to that mobile home park is a golf thing, hit the ball as far as you can in a miniature golf thing. Where is the community college going to expand if you convert that into housing? We need to preserve those things and think in the long term. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, thank you for your testimony tonight and on many, many occasions. We appreciate your participation here. Thank you very much. This will conclude our invitation to audience. Is there any item that any council member would like to place on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Grasso.
I don't want to place anything on the agenda. I don't know if this is actually the appropriate place for it, but I just wanted to tell everybody out there, I want to thank my constituents for giving me 8 honor years of great service. I really enjoyed doing the county council. I also want to thank all my colleagues for putting up with some of my radical ideas of pieces of legislation. I know some have been pretty interesting. And also I wanted to thank, the Chief of Staff, Mr. Kane, and all the people that are in Anne Arundel County for dealing with me, because I know I'm not an easy thing to deal with every day. So just in general, I just want to go out with a bang and just say thank you to everybody, and appreciate the 8 years that you all gave me the ability to serve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. And you were correct. This is not the proper place time to do that. But so you're going to actually get an opportunity to do that again. I'll invite you to do that again if you would so like to do. Madam Secretary, please read. Oh, excuse me. The council is now going to sit as the Board of Health. So I'll invite Billy Penley, Acting Health Officer, to come forward. Dr. David Rose. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Paroka and members of the Board of Health. For the record, I am Billy Penley, Acting Health Officer for Anne Arundel County. I've been Acting Health Officer for 49 days now. Prior to that, I was the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Health under the leadership of Acting Health Officer Fran Phillips. Ms. Phillips left to accept a position at the Maryland Department of Health as Deputy Secretary for Public Health Services. I'm happy to be here before you tonight to highlight some of our achievements of our department and answer any questions you may have. I'd like to acknowledge the other Department of Health staff who are here tonight, as well as the Director of Mental Health Agency, Adrian Michler. To my left is Dr. David Rose, Deputy Health Officer for Public Health. In the middle, first rows here is Sean Kane, Deputy Health Officer for Operations. I also have Sandy O'Neill, our Director of Behavioral Health Services, Don Curdion, Acting Director of Environmental Health Services, and Ellen Jones, our Public Information Officer. You have been distributed a blue packet, each one of you have it, with materials of information. In this packet, you will find a copy of our organizational chart, which includes the personnel roster of program managers on the reverse side, and an updated directory services. Both of these documents are on the left side of the folder. In addition, we have a brochure entitled Road to Recovery, Medication-Assisted Treatment Fast Facts, an opioid-related data dashboard, behavioral health opioid efforts, Brooklyn Park Rodent Control Program Assessments 2017 versus 2018, and a report on bullying. I will provide you some brief highlights regarding some of our achievements and initiatives of the Department of Health. However, this will only be a small snapshot of the ongoing daily work of the employees of the Department of Health, who are all public health heroes. Following my remarks, Dr. David Rose will present the report on bullying that was requested by County Council earlier this year. The opioid crisis continues to dominate our behavioral health focus. You will find in your packet an opioid-related dashboard. As of last week, October 9th, we have had 852 overdoses and 143 fatalities. Over half of the deaths involve fentanyl. There have been 929 safe station assessments for 2018 as of September 30th. The total number of safe station assessments since the inception of the program, April 2017, is 1,337, and that's as of September 30th. This information is updated weekly and may be found on our website. On the back of this sheet also is a map of the county, and this is telling you where all the overdoses are occurring. You'll also find in your packet a document that details the Behavioral Health Bureau's opioid efforts, including information on prevention, access to treatment, medication-assisted treatment, and recovery programs, including peer support. Our Emergency Preparedness Response Unit worked with our public safety partners in response to the active shooter incident on June 28th at the Capitol Gazette offices. We coordinated with the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency to quickly deploy licensed mental health clinicians to the Reunification Center. The clinicians work with law enforcement, witness, and victims' families to provide mental health services immediately following the incident. This unit continues to work with partner agencies to enhance interagency coordination for future planning and response efforts. Your packet also includes a graph from the Brooklyn Park Property Assessments for our rodent control program. Over 1,500 properties were assessed in 3 high complaint areas of Brooklyn Park. The graph compares assessments completed in May of 2017 through July of 2017 to the assessments completed in May through July 2018 for the same properties and demonstrates the tremendous success of this program. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So the blue is 2017, the red is 2018. The numbers went way down. As part of the next phase of the rodent control program, over 2,500 properties in Greenhaven were assessed this past summer. Our School Health Bureau has received national recognition for their School Health Opioid Prevention Awareness Model. This program includes opioid awareness, prevention, and Narcan training that is specifically targeted for the school setting. School staff provides community outreach at the Meet the Coach Night events. At these meetings, we encourage parents to work with their healthcare providers to avoid or limit the use of opioid-based prescriptions when treating student athletes for injuries. In conclusion, I invite Dr. David Rose to present the report on bullying. Thank you for this opportunity to share information about the important work that the dedicated staff of the Anne Arundel Department of Health performs every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation. Dr. Rose?
This will be very brief. I understand that there's a crunch for time, but just in response to April's resolution 1018, which declared bullying a nuisance and requests information from the acting health officer at the time on implementation of a prevention plan, we went about the business of consulting our partners in these efforts, schools, police, and even the county's Human Relations Compliance Office. And we did research looking at, number one, the prevalence and trends currently within the county and within the state, looking at research as to causes and some of the consequences. We looked at some of the current interventions that are currently being done, not only by the health department, but also by schools and others. And then there's the last section there is about the action plan. So we put all of that together within the report that you have in front of you now. And again, this will be implemented by a consortium of stakeholders in this, as I said, these departments here, but also organizations within the community and interested community members as well. There is nothing in particular that I wanted to report out of the report. I realize you're just now seeing it. It's been on our website for a very short time. And so if there are going to be any questions or anything later on, be very happy to address those in any manner that you wish. I realize that you haven't had a chance to look at it, but those are basically the components there.
Dr. Rose, thank you very, very much. And Ms. Henley, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Are there any questions at all? We'll move on then. Thanks a great deal. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of October 1st, 2018.
I believe we need the preliminary motion first.
I think we do. May I have a motion to, well, no. I have a motion to a reading of, the partial reading of the minutes will constitute a reading of the whole.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Do we need to vote on that? No. We didn't vote on that? Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of October 1st, 2018.
The meeting was called to order by Chairman Michael Peruch at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Mr. Fink, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 1st, 2018?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes of October 1st, 2018 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8018.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
I would like to ask you to do another motion to vote that the partial reading of any bill or resolution constitutes the reading of the whole.
Thank you very much. May I have such a motion?
I will move that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
The motion carries. All right, we're good then to read the title of Bill number 8018 as amended.
Bill number 8018, an ordinance concerning public ethics.
Thank you. Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick in the County Executive's Office with me at the table, Lori Blair Kosmeyer from the Office of Law, and Mike Botsaris from the County Ethics Commission. You all should have received a letter from the Ethics Commission regarding the amendment that was adopted at the prior meeting. We would ask you to support this bill tonight. And we have a technical amendment that we have to offer at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Are there any questions? If not, we'll open the public hearing on Bill number 8018. We don't have anybody signed up. Does anybody like to speak on Bill number 8018? Please come down at this time. Good evening, Mr. Obey.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, council. Corporal O'Brien Atkinson, the Anne Arundel County Fraternal Order Police, 1311 Generals Highway, Crownsville, Maryland. I'm here on behalf of the Anne Arundel County Employee Coalition to speak in support of Bill 8018 as amended. I know there was a lot of discussion about whether or not employees and employee representatives were protected under current law, and I personally believe in the theory that we are protected. However, that is just a theory. This year, prior to the primary election, there was an anonymous ethics complaint filed against me for being a lobbyist who was not registered, and I am not a lobbyist. I represent our employees, and that's my job. I represent our police officers. Our fire union president also received an anonymous ethics complaint charging the same violation. And coincidentally, in 2010, when County Executive John Leopold was seeking a second term, I also received a complaint that I was in violation of this law. We got through it. I don't believe that the Ethics Commission ever came out with any kind of finding of guilt. I think it was resolved, but I believe that this legislation will go a long way in protecting us and our employees in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Corporal. Appreciate it. Appreciate your testimony. Anybody else? This is last call for this bill. Seeing no movement, we will now close the public hearing on Bill 8018. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8018 as amended.
Bill number 8018, an ordinance concerning public ethics.
Any further discussion? There's a technical amendment. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 7.
This technical amendment corrects a typographical error in a citation to state law.
Move to adopt, Mr. Chair. Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Marsick?
No, sir.
Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 7.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 7 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 8018 as amended.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 8018 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, folks. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8418 as amended.
Bill number 8418, an ordinance concerning zoning, general provisions, licensed premises of licensed dispensaries of medical cannabis.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many of you know the purpose behind the introduction of this bill. I'm going to vote against the bill at the end of the meeting. I believe there's any reason for it to proceed at this point.
I didn't hear the last thing you said. I'm sorry.
Oh, I said there's no reason for us to move this bill forward. It's not necessary.
All right. So are you withdrawing it then?
We can't withdraw because it's been amended. So we just have to vote it down.
Is
mean, you can vote for it,
any
but-
further discussion then? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 8418 as amended.
Mr. Grasso.
Nay.
Mr. Fink.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Mr. Trumbauer.
No.
Mr. Walker.
Nay.
Mr. Smith.
Nay.
Mr. Peruka.
Nay.
None in the affirmative, 7 in the negative. Bill number 8418 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 8518 as amended.
Bill number 8518, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, transfer of appropriation, Chief Administrative Office, Office of Central Services.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Marsick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzik in the County Executive's Office. Within the table, Stephen Theroux from Budget Office, Lori Blair Klossmeyer from the Office of Law. We also have Carissa Gowan from Aging and Adrian Michler from Mental Health here in the audience as well. We will offer a technical amendment at the appropriate time. This is the bill to transfer money for security at the senior centers, as well as creating 2 new crisis response teams in the county.
Thank you. Are there any questions, any discussion? Any questions? If not, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 8518. There's nobody signed up. So if anybody would like to testify on Bill 8518, please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we will close the public hearing on Bill number 8518 as amended. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 8518 as amended.
Bill number 8518, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, transfer of appropriation, Chief Administrative Office, Office of Central Services.
Thank you. Any discussion? There is a technical amendment. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
This technical amendment corrects a mathematical error in the total amount of the supplementary appropriation.
Move to adopt, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Please excuse me. Strike that. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink. Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
I was just trying to hurry things up there a little bit. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title. Please, we can now vote on the bill, right? Bill number 8518. So please, any further discussion? Please call the roll on bill number 8518 as amended.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink. Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. And Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 8518 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of bill number 9018 as amended.
Bill number 9018, an ordinance concerning animal control, potentially dangerous, and vicious animals.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso.
It's pretty much as it says. I want to thank our folks in the animal world, Ms. Cheney, Mr. Bob from Rude's Ranch, and friends for all the effort that they put into this bill, and I think we've got a real gem here. Hopefully the council will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now, if there's any questions, any discussion, if not, we'll open the public hearing on bill number 9018. There's no sign up, so anybody who would like to testify on bill number 9018, please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we will close the public hearing on bill number 9018 as amended. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill 9018 as amended.
Bill number 9018, an ordinance concerning animal control, potentially dangerous, and vicious animals.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 9018 as amended.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 9018 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of bill number 9118.
Bill number 9118, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development and construction code fees.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick in the County Executive's Office. With me at the table, Melissa Beardmore from Anne Arundel Community College, and Greg Swain from the Office of Law, Phil Hager from Planning and Zoning. Bill 9118 exempts the community college from permit fees within planning and zoning. This was a existing practice that we are looking to codify here so the community college does not have to pay fees. We would ask for your support of this bill tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. It's so the situation is that they've never paid fees, but we're just
Correct.
okay. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? If not, we'll now open the public hearing on bill number 9118. There's no sign up. Does anybody want to testify on bill number 9118? Please come forward at this time.
Sorry. Yeah.
Good evening, Ms. Johnson.
Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. I support this. I think it's a good idea. And again, I will ask you, I'll put in my plug again, you know, you need some extra space around the community college because in the next 50 years, there are going to be more people who are going to need that facility. And you need to preserve room, you know, in your 50-year plan because you know St. John's College has a 100-year plan. So the least we can do for the community college is preserve these areas, and then likewise save them, you know, I mean, why would you make them pay fees? Thank you. Vote for it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Appreciate that. We'll now close the public hearing on bill number 9118. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 9118.
Bill number 9118, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development and construction code fees.
Any final discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 9118.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Bill number 9118 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of bill number 9218.
Bill number 9218, an ordinance concerning licenses, swimming pools.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick in the County Executive's Office. With me at the table, Lori Blair Klossmeyer from the Office of Law and Don Kirchian from Department of Health. As we discussed at the work session, 9218 reduces the license fees for public and semi-public pools and spas. Currently, the fee for a public or semi-public pool or spa operating 6 months or more of a year is $725. The fee for a public or semi-public pool or spa operating less than 6 months of a year is $350. After the Health Department and the Budget Office did analysis of permits and fees collected and the time spent by staff, the recommendation was made to reduce this to...
Time's up, Mr. Marzick.
I've never...
And you were thinking
New policy around here.
you were thinking you were special, weren't you?
Please pass the bill.
There you go.
Should have implemented that a long time ago.
Could you please summarize, right? Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Any questions for panel?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Prisky.
I didn't see an analysis of how we compare to other counties in terms of fees. Do we have that?
We did not do that, no.
Thank you.
Anything further? We will now, if not, we'll now open the public hearing on Bill number 9318. Anybody like? There's nobody signed up. Would anybody like to speak on Bill number 9318? Please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we will close the public hearing on Bill number 9318. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 9318.
92, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm down the page. Excuse me. Please read the title of Bill 9218.
I wasn't going to say nothing.
Bill number 9218, an ordinance concerning licenses, swimming pools.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please
Chairman?
call. No,
Mr. Chair?
excuse me. Madam Auditor.
Yes, I just wanted to point to the council's attention that in the blue letter, you'll see that my review of the calculation of the $219 was not substantiated. Based on the information provided by the Health Department, I don't think that they can lower the fee, at least based to that amount.
Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to Don on this. I think the calculations, and I think the auditor, we had a discussion on this on Friday. I think it's just a matter of a different way to look at this calculation as far as how you come up with the fee based on the hours that the county uses to administer these permits. And I'll let Mr. Kirchian go into an explanation of that.
Yeah, when we looked at this fee analysis and the way we...
I'm sorry, would you just say your name and
Oh,
address?
sorry.
Thank you.
Don Curting, Acting Director of Environmental Health.
Not address, but your name.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When we calculated this fee, we looked at the amount of time that is spent on this and the type of people that we use. We hire summer students that are college students with similar interests to this, and we use that instead of licensed sanitarians, so we can use a less expensive labor force, and that brings that cost down. And looking at the amount of time that we spend on the average of these inspections, a lot of the inspections that are done during the summer in the community pools, which is our biggest volume, sometimes they're just verifying that we have licensed operators and lifeguards on duty, and the inspection is very short, therefore it averages over time.
Thank you. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. So what happens if the auditor is correct and the figure is off and this has a bigger fiscal cost than you're estimating? How do you make that up?
Well, when we looked at this, we felt that the way we looked at our staff that we use for this and over the time, that the duties of the supervisor, which is the most expensive salary, is actually split in 3 different programs. Therefore, it doesn't spend as much time as when we had originally calculated this. And we shared that information with the auditor, and we feel that the way we justified it, that it balances it out.
And if it ended up not balancing out, would you have to come back for a budget transfer bill, or do you just make it up in your own budget? How would that get reconciled?
We would make it up in our operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Madam Auditor.
I just wanted to point out that based on the cost that the Health Department identified for this program, they're saying it's $185,000 to administer it, and based on the $219 fee and the number of licenses that they issue, they'll recover about $102,000. So there's a gap.
Sir?
Yeah, and when we recalculated that and shared that information, with using the summer students and splitting the supervisor's duties with the well program as well, we feel we balanced that figure out to bring it down to that 102, the $219 per permit.
Mr. Chair?
Madam Auditor?
I don't want to carry this on, but I did request a revised calculation, and I never received it, so I can only go on the information that I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Grasso?
I'm going to say, sir, who cares? If the number's wrong, you just make up for it in the next year. We act like we're giving blood over here, okay? If it's just a mistake, then we turn around and they'll fix it on their next budget. It's not a big deal and why we keep beating this over and over the man's head. End of story. It's his department. I think he should know what he's doing. End of it. Thank you.
Thank you, except we haven't, I feel compelled to just, I don't disagree that it doesn't seem to be a big matter, except that I want our auditor to be satisfied with was there a problem in delivering the additional information to her?
No, I think it's just the calculation was done in a way where you total up the number of hours that are done used for this permit process, and then back out the fee based on the hours that are used. And what Mr. Kirchian is saying is that the numbers were revised based on who would actually be doing this work. So the numbers came down. So we feel as if our numbers came down to the number that the auditor was looking to come to, but we have a disagreement on that.
Thank you. Madam Auditor, does that satisfy you?
No, sir.
Thank you. Anything further? Anything further? We'll then open the public hearing on, excuse me, we did that. So we're set to vote if there's no discussion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9218.
Mr. Grasso?
Aye.
Mr. Fink?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
Mr. Trumbauer?
No.
Mr. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
No.
Mr. Pruka?
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Bill number 9218 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9318.
Bill number 9318, an ordinance concerning licenses, food service facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, again, Don Kirchian from the Health Department, Lori Blair Klossmeyer from the Office of Law, and Bernie Marzick from the County Executive's Office. As we discussed at the work session, 9318 reduces the license fee for certain food service facilities operating for a temporary period of time. Currently, the fee is $195. The Department of Health has made process changes internally to use less staff time to justify the cost and lowering the fee to $114. Hopefully, this will benefit some of the small businesses and nonprofits who operate in the county and pay this permit fee.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Is there any discussion? Mr. Pruski?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, same question I had before. Do we know how we compare to other jurisdictions with this fee?
When we looked at some of the other neighboring counties, we're in balance with counties like Montgomery County and Prince George's County. Some of the smaller counties are a little higher because of their work. They have less workforce, and it really depends on whether you go out and inspect every one of these or not. We made process changes to actually spend less staff time in the field on the weekends, so we do more of an analysis in the office with the food service handlers to see what their knowledge of food handling is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Any other questions? We'll now then open the public hearing on Bill number 9318. There's no sign up. Anybody would like to testify on 9318 this time? Please come forward at this time. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing on 9318. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9318.
Bill number 9318, an ordinance concerning licenses, food service facilities.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Madam Auditor, nothing? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9318.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt.
Aye.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Bill number 9318 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9418 as amended. Thank you, folks.
Bill number 9418, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate school facilities, Parole Town Center growth management area.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing further to add, but I'll be happy to address any questions the council has.
Thank you. Mr. Marzick.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions for anybody? Any further discussion? If not, we'll open the public hearing on Bill number 9418 as amended. There's no sign up. If anybody would like to testify on 9418 as amended, please come forward at this time. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing on 9418 as amended. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9418 as amended.
Bill number 9418, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate school facilities, Parole Town Center growth management area.
Thank you. Any final discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9418 as amended.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 9418 is passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9518.
Bill number 9518, an ordinance concerning public safety, animal control, animals outdoors.
Thank you. Mr. Grasso.
Now, this piece of legislation is pretty much a ditto of the one that we did for the dogs about tying animals outside in the period. And in the bill, as you probably have noticed, it's the most basic humane requirements, like providing a shelter. Instead of taking a horse and letting it sit out there for a day in the sun and has no ability to go nowhere, and we turn around and we rope it up and we just let it sit there. There's been many instances of people that turn around and get goats, and they don't have a fence that's high enough around their house, and yet they have a goat. And then what they do is they say, well, to keep the goat from jumping over the fence, they put a leash around the goat, and then the goat jumps over the fence with the leash and strangles the goat. So if you look at the legislation, it is really anything different in this piece of legislation than what we did for the dogs. It's the same thing for humane treatment, providing adequate shelter, making sure that their cages doesn't have feces all over the place, making sure that they're not being tied out in the heat or extreme cold weather. People will take horses and tie them outside in freezing cold weather when the ice is actually falling off of the horse. And that's what this bill is. It's just a humane bill. And when we don't have a piece of legislation in play, and basically what starts to happen is animal control gets inundated with phone calls, and generally from the same phone calls over and over again, because the public can't understand why we're not doing anything about it. So they turn around and they have a situation with a horse is being left outside. Animal control reports back to the person and says, well, we don't have a law that says anything different. Then another person rides by. John Grasso says, well, why is the horse out there with icicles forming off the end? So I'll call animal control, and animal control will say, hey, we don't have a law. And this can cause animal control to come out numerous amounts of times. Having a piece of legislation sets the framework. Animal control can come out, can address the situation. You can go to the owner and say, listen, we got a problem here. You don't have humane treatment over here. And then the owner will comply. And then what happens is it saves the county from sending numerous amount of calls out there for animal control people to call the people and just say, look, I'm sorry, we don't have a law. So this is the most basic part of life. I've always said over and over again, the only reason we have laws are for people that just don't have some good common sense or self-serving. The general public has good common sense. Unfortunately, there is a few out there that don't have this, that leave their animals out there in extreme temperatures, have them living within their feces. I mean, it's a mess. So we have to provide some kind of guidelines, and I hope the council will support this.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Any questions for Mr. Grasso?
I just have a question, either for the animal control. What is, there's a part that says that nothing may be construed as imposing standards more stringent than generally accepted farming practices. Who's going to make that decision? Who's the person deciding what the farming practices are?
John Grasso.
John Grasso
That's
will be
right.
around. So
call me, I'll make the run myself.
Say your name and record.
Yeah, I am.
Kern Rare, Assistant County Attorney with the Office of Law. The generally accepted farming practices would be known throughout the community. Animal control would have communication with the Department of Agriculture, I would assume, who would also be aware of what the generally accepted farming practices are. Whether or not every one of them is written down in some document, I'm not sure of, but I do believe that generally accepted farming practices would be known to both the farmers in the community as well as to animal control, who handle cases involving farms on a routine basis.
So it would be in consultation with the Department of Agriculture, trying to determine what that is. Because basically you're exempting them from everything that's in this bill based on some standard. And I'm just asking, who's the final point person on deciding that this person's okay and this other person is not?
Okay. So there are some standards that are written, and the Department of Agriculture does handle those. There's the, am I not loud enough? Sorry. Robin Catlett, for the record, by the way. For example, the Maryland Horse Council has put together a written standard of what's considered minimal standards that are acceptable for horses. So there are pamphlets and other things like that that are prepared. And there's also typically for livestock cases, things like that, we do work in connection with the Maryland Department of Agriculture because that's primarily their area of expertise. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that we decide what the farm is and what those practices are. So that's what, because otherwise none of this means anything. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Mr. Chair, if I could, before I ask my questions, I'd like to hear what the administration's position is on the bill.
Oh, sure.
If you don't mind.
I think we have a couple of concerns with the bill, but we'll defer to the council on this. I think I've talked with Mr. Grasso about this. The one that's mentioned in the blue note is the increased calls to animal control that will inevitably come from this legislation. And then just the general concern of, pardon the pun, but camel's nose under the tent with this, that this is going to be going on to a different area for our animal control staff to be going into deal with farm situations, but also I'm failing for the word in my mind right now, but for backyard agriculture essentially. And I guess my last concern is just this could lead to kind of more neighbor disputes of, you know, my neighbor has chickens that are going to the bathroom and it's a mess, or whatever it may be. So I just would express those concerns, but if the council is comfortable with this bill, we will be supportive of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Marzik. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mr. Walker.
Ms. Catlett, in Mr. Grasso's testimony in explanation of the bill, he referenced horses being outside as people are driving by. Is there not a requirement in the code currently for run-in shelters?
There is currently for running shelters for horses specifically, not for goats.
So if horses were, right, but if horses were on a farm and there were, as Mr. Grasso's characterization was, icicles forming on them, I mean, they have an opportunity, should they want to go inside something that's in the pasture, there is something that's required by law for them to be able to access.
They should, and if they don't, that is something that we can currently address.
Sure, thank you. I just, you know, I think I share Mr. Marzik's concerns with this bill, and I just want to read briefly the letter from the Anne Arundel County Farm Bureau, because I want this to make sure that this is on the record and we're considering this as we get ready to vote on this bill. It's very short, but I just want to read it. It says, while the intent of this bill is admirable, the language of the bill gives great concern to its interpretation and eventual enforcement. While Clause 8 provides exemption to farms and farmers, Anne Arundel Farm Bureau supports agriculture throughout the county and recognizes that agriculture exists in both rural and urban areas, on both farms and non-farms alike. The bill does not distinguish any delineation between domestic, feral, livestock, or wild animals. While we assume the bill is intended for domestic animals, including livestock, it's just at that, an assumption. The bill does exclude dogs, which are covered in another recently passed bill. Backyard chicken owners, a large part of the urban agricultural movement, will find difficulty complying with this code. As a poultry tester for the Maryland Department of Agriculture, almost all residential chicken flocks I come into contact with will not meet these requirements. In addition, many of the popular backyard chicken houses and enclosures sold at stores such as Tractor Supply do not conform to the proposed code. There are other areas of concern within this bill, but suffice to say that this bill needs additional work. Anne Arundel Farm Bureau highly recommends that the bill be voted down and that the Agriculture, Farming, and Agritourism Commission review the current language in the proposed bill and subsequently provide recommendations as needed. And that's signed by Mr. Faber, who's the president of the Anne Arundel County Farm Bureau. And that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Grasso?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a problem. And just like we had a problem with the dogs and everything else, we can do something about it and get something started on the books, and then the next council can address it and fine tune it. But otherwise, we can just turn around and kick it down the can. Kick it down the road, the so-called can. So the issue that we have here is that part of this bill is not allowing an animal to be tethered outside without no shelter. And so maybe this gentleman who wrote this little article might be the perfect farmer, and he takes care of it. And then once again, like I made the argument before, laws aren't for people with common sense. They are for the ones that don't have the common sense. So you're taking a letter from a gentleman that probably does the right thing, but I'm addressing the people that don't do the right thing. And I just don't see how we could turn around and allow an animal to stay outside, tethered on a rope in all different kinds of conditions, and not make sure that there's housing and not making sure that it's clean in the environment they're living in. And this legislation is going there and is at least making an attempt to go in there, because if we don't move forward with this, the next question is, will the next council do something about it? And to me, I just don't, if I can save one goat, whether it be domesticated or if you want to call it a wild goat, I've never heard of such a thing, I guess unless in the mountains, from being tied to a rope and put outside because someone doesn't want to make their fence tall enough from being strangled, that's what this bill is about. It's about getting the step to move forward to address farm animals. So I ask the council once again to support it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Mr. Marzick, anything further?
No, sir.
Thank you. In that case, we will now open the public hearing on Bill number 9518. I'm sorry, yes, 9518. There's no sign up. If anybody would like to testify on 9518, please come down at this time. I see some movement. Good evening, Pastor.
David Whitney, Round Top Drive, Annapolis, Maryland. And I want to thank all of you for your years, some 8, of service to our community. This is an interesting bill because it's a great concern for the animals, and I agree with that. I agree we ought to be caring for the animals. I hope the next county council can have as much compassion and care for human beings, specifically babies. And if you really, because abortion is hidden, most people never see it, I would encourage you to see the Gosnell movie because you can see the ugly reality of abortion in America today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pastor, very, very much for your testimony. Ma'am.
My name's Wendy Cazone, 1200 Patuxent Road, Odenton, Maryland. I own one of the last and only livestock rescue sanctuaries in Anne Arundel County. And I would just ask that this be passed for the mere protection of the animals. Some of the stuff that I see, I take many, many animals over the years. I've been doing it for 30 years. I take many, many animals from animal control and give these animals a permanent, safe home for the rest of their life. Some have been so abused, neglected, mistreated, it's just horrendous. And like Mr. Grasso said, it's not for the guys that have common sense and know that their animals need a dish of water, that they need a shelter over them. It's for the ones that don't know it. And the Farm Bureau is obviously fantastic and knows animals need to be taken care of. But as the county grows and more people come in here and they're getting more animals, some of them just don't know how to take care of them. I'm willing to help. I have a website. I help anybody I can with the animals, but some people don't know. I've seen animals almost frozen out in fields because people put them out there and they don't have any sort of shelter, nothing. They have no shelter. They have no drinking water. Nothing. It's horrendous. This merely protects them. It's actually the rain that doesn't get them so much. It's the wind and the cold when it blows through. These poor animals, and you usually don't see a horse or a goat or cow or anything like that shiver. I have seen them out there shivering so bad. They're so cold, and all they need is a little shelter over them. That's all they need. So I would just ask
again beg that so that animals can stop suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. We will now then close the public hearing on Bill number 9518. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9518.
Bill number 9518, an ordinance concerning public safety, animal control, animals outdoors.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9518.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Nay.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Pruka.
Nay.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Bill number 9518 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9618.
Bill number 9618, an ordinance concerning floodplain management, erosion and sediment control, and stormwater management.
Thank you. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is my last bill to submit to the council. It's a very simple bill. Right now, if you are a contractor and you violate the sediment and erosion control, you suffer a Class C violation. That's a maximum of $1,000, or I'm sorry, $500 for the first and $1,000 for the second. I would submit to you that has not served as a deterrent to the contractor community in my district and probably in some of yours. I've had several high-profile failures of sediment and erosion control, and I've found that unfortunately, there's not been adequate enforcement actions. So what this bill does is it simply ups the game to a Class A civil offense. Now that has a maximum of $10,000 for a violation, but of course, that's up to the discretion. And I would also submit to you, if a contractor does not violate the sediment and erosion control laws, that they have nothing to lose by this legislation. So. With that, I'll turn it over to the admin, see what they say.
Mr. Marzik.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, Bernie Marzik, County Executive's Office. With me at the table, Dan Kane from Inspection and Permits, and Greg Swain from the Office of Law. We will again defer to the council on this. I will raise the issue that has come up with this bill, which is that there is not really a clear guidance as to when the fine is $500, $1,000, or $10,000. So it does leave a lot of discretion. I think the current version is that it's $500 for the first offense, $1,000 for a second offense, and this would obviously change that so that it leaves a latitude for the county to decide what that fee should be. So we'll defer to the council on this bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marzik. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up to Mr. Marzik's comment, I believe that increasing the maximum does give the county an additional tool to enforce the rules that we have on the books. And I personally feel that the current violations are not a deterrent, and so I would love it if Mr. Kane and his staff and the Office of Law had additional stick to wield when necessary, but certainly this isn't a mandatory minimum bill, so there will be discretion, but I think that it's time to give the enforcement authorities a little bit more ability to enforce the laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. Any other discussion? For my part, this does trouble me, and I've talked to some folks who have brought up the fact that there could be a problem where a contractor does what he's supposed to do, but because we've had I don't know, I guess we've had some significant rainfall, we've had some 100-year storms or whatever, and that even that they do the prudent thing or the thing that they're required to do, there still could be a violation, and I'm concerned about that. And I guess for my part, I'm also concerned that if you give this bigger stick, I think as you called it, to give it a bigger stick, there's I'm not sure that there's been. You say the sponsor says you feel that so far there hasn't been a deterrent. But is there anything more than that in your feeling that you can point to? Is there some statistics or some evidence that, I mean, before we hit the nail with a sledgehammer, do we have some knowledge that the hammer didn't work?
There have been some data analysis done by some of the environmental advocacy groups, I believe. I don't have that in front of me. I can tell you that there's one particular high-profile construction site that has had some, I would consider, catastrophic failures. I know that Mr. Kane's staff has been down there a lot. I know that the State Department of the Environment has been brought in, and I'd be happy to introduce you to some of my constituents, Mr. Pruka, that feel that there is not enough deterrent being done for situations like that. But I do not have a packet prepared with statistics and data to share.
I appreciate that. I guess I would make offer one more thought, which is that if in this situation where you can inflict the maximum penalty on the first offense, while we would hope and think that would not be the approach for regulators, I think as legislators we have to take into consideration the worst case scenario where people will go to the edge and over the edge. I think it's just human nature. And I'm worried that a $10,000 fine could be inflicted inappropriately, let me say it that way, in a manner that's not in keeping with your intent in this legislation, when there's $10,000 that can be assessed on the first go-round. So that's just a concern that I have.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the concern. I will say my experience working with Mr. Kane's staff has been, to one of your earlier points, when there is an extreme rain event, hurricane, a nor'easter that parks over top of us and dumps 5-6 inches of rain, my experience is the department takes that into account. I don't know what the official term is, act of God or extreme event or something, but I don't think that they have been levying large fines when there's no reasonable action that a contractor could have taken. To your other point, you think it's potentially inappropriate to have a $10,000 fine for a violation. My counterpoint would be, I think it's inappropriate on a multi-million-dollar development to have a $500 fine when they are quite literally failing catastrophically, repeatedly, and dumping pollutants into our public waterways that we are supposed to hold in public trust for our constituents. So I am perfectly comfortable giving the enforcement authorities greater authorities to use deterrence to enforce the laws on our books. And I believe that the contractor community and the development community should be held accountable to meet those requirements. And if those requirements are too stringent, then I invite the next council, if they dare, to weaken them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Grasso.
Mr. Swain, when we talked about like different legislation you and I have talked about, is there like a due process type deal over here? I mean, my fear is, I'm with Councilman Trumbauer because I know what he's trying to do, and it's quite admirable. You know, I know how this plays out because in Councilman Fink's area, and I'm going to bring him into play again, being was against my chum bill. Down in the Marley Neck Boulevard area, these folks down here were just very loose on doing what they were supposed to do, and I called Mr. Kane's office, and you know, they turn around and wind up having a mess into Tanier Cove, and then I think we spent $200,000 dredging that cove out. Now, there was something in the rules that they were following the law, but I don't know what happened, and maybe Mr. Kane can go better with this. My biggest concern is like what he's saying. You got a huge development over here, and $500 is nothing to them. And I went through Tanier Cove, and I mean, the silt fences weren't up, nothing. And then I had this one guy taking a picture of a drone, you know, after the storm, and you could see all the green muck going into Marley Creek, and we just spent all this money dredging it. So what Mr. Trumbauer is saying is good. It's very good. What Mr. Pruitt is saying over here is that I'm worried about the little guy that doesn't have that kind of fund, and to slam them with $10,000 is an issue. Now, of course, if he's following the law, like Mr. Trumbauer is saying, he's got nothing to worry about. So is there a due process involved with this? In other words, when something comes down, is it just 10 grand? I mean, how does it go here?
Greg Swain, Supervising County Attorney. Well, the process would be the department can charge up to $1,000 by a citation. That's like a traffic ticket. So they could charge up to $1,000 with the citation, which the defendant could just pay the citation and satisfy it. Anything above $1,000 and up to $10,000 in this case would require an injunction. So the Office of Law would prepare an injunction, and the amount of the fine would be set one of two ways, either by agreement with the defendant, taking into account the factors listed in the ordinance, or by a court. If the parties can't agree, it would go to court. Now, our experience with the district court or the circuit court, a lot of these fines, is the judges tend to be fairly conservative when they set the fines. But if it is a serious violation, then I have to agree with Mr. Trumbauer. This does give the flexibility of increasing those fines. It's not intended that someone who has a minor failure is going to be hit with a $10,000 fine. And that's part of the reason why the different factors are listed in assessing these fines, so they're not assigned arbitrarily. So once you get above $1,000, it's either by agreement or it's going to be set by a judge. So there is certainly due process because the defendant is involved in both of those.
I've just kind of learned, like in business, that sometimes, they're willing to pay those kind of fines because it's the cost of doing business. They're looking at the bigger part of the project and how much it's making, so they get loose on everything because, like he's saying, it's a little fine, so what do they care? What do they got to pay, $500? But you start laying $10,000 then on the plate, then you start looking at yourself, well, they're going to be a little bit more cautious. I'm feeling a little bit better with the due process on how things are going here because, like I said, dealing in Baltimore City, like Mr. Pruk is saying, you have a bureaucrat just comes through there that was pretty much a person who was picked on in school the whole time and suddenly has this new title, and they're about to show everybody who the boss is. And they come there and they start slamming these kind of crazy fines, and I just always worry about that kind of person because that's what we deal with the city. So something to think about. Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer, Ms. Bruca.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Can I ask a question, Mr. Kane or Mr. Swain? In the kind of case that Mr. Trumbauer described, where there's flagrant and repetitive, and somebody just doesn't care, do you have other recourse? Is there other recourse you can take with respect, or does planning and zoning or does inspection permits have some other recourse they can take?
Well, the biggest recourse we have is a stop work order. That just stops them in their tracks. Of course, you always have to let them work to restore what is not working and put up additional measures. But financially, we don't have anything else to do unless they, because all we have is security. And then with security, we can only do something when they fail to.
Security meaning that they posted a bond?
Yeah, but that's for the improvements that they're making. So we can't touch that.
Well, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but I wonder if it would make sense if the amount of the fine would be somehow tied to the amount of the bond, percentage of the bond, that you wouldn't have an inordinate slap against a smaller situation.
Well, they're kind of two different situations because the bond is meant to cover a failure by the applicant to perform the work, whereas a violation is they haven't done the work properly.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to say they're the same thing. I was just trying to say that the amount of the bond might be an indication of the size of the project.
Well, one of the under the factors in the ordinance, the gravity of the offense, the willfulness of the offense, and also the cost of abatement is included as factors to be determined when you figure out the amount of the fine. So the cost of abatement is not insignificant because that's something that we would always seek in any violation. We're going to seek for the violation to be abated as well as the fines.
Let me. I'm sorry, Mr. King. Go ahead.
I could just jump in real quick. It's about the violation. So you could have a 10-lot subdivision or a 100-lot subdivision. Right. It could be the exact same failure because only a portion of the 100-lot subdivision is failing.
Right, but if in fact, it seems to me that if you need a bigger stick because you've got somebody who's being flagrant or not paying attention or being repetitive, et cetera, I don't know the exact words. I don't remember the exact words Mr. Trumbauer used, but you can stop them. I mean, you have another tool, right? That you can.
We can do a stop work order, correct?
Right. I mean, you do already have a bigger hammer. Is my point. Let me go back to another point, Mr. Swain, that you brought up about judges being fairly conservative. I've thought about that a little bit, and it just again concerns me that if we're a branch of government, and that judge is another branch of government, and I don't want to be I don't want to be negligent, thinking that, well, this other branch of government will cover me, because I don't want to be irresponsible. That's the word I was looking for. And say, well, he's going to be responsible behind me. I'd rather make sure that I'm not irresponsible in my branch of government. And I just my concern my concern is that this is a draconian increase in the situation. I wonder if it's really necessary. So that's my.
Well, if I can add, the purpose of the 4 factors in the ordinance to determine the amount of the fine is important, and it's important because it's based on precedent not only with sediment control violations in the critical area, but any violation in the critical area. Aside from sediment control violations, any zoning violations, et cetera, are subject to a $10,000 fine already.
In the critical area?
In any kind of violation.
But this is making the critical area everywhere then?
Well, this is making this not critical area everywhere, but only as to sediment control.
Okay.
What I'm saying is any other type of violation in the critical area is subject to that $10,000 fine. So we have a lot of experience in how the courts apply this fine with these same consideration factors to violations.
Well, yeah, and I'm not arguing that you don't have that experience. I'm saying that experience, I'm just suggesting that's not, that because they're responsible is no reason for me to not care about being responsible, because they're going to catch you behind me.
Well, one other factor I'll add is the amount of the fine is also authorized by state law. There's a specific statute that authorizes this amount of fine.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Mr. Walker.
Thank you. Mr. Kane, in your experience, I know you guys deal with, I don't know, hundreds of these settlement control plans a year, thousands maybe. I'm not sure the number exactly, but
we'll go with hundreds.
Hundreds, okay. And Mr. Trumbauer's, it wasn't his hypothetical, it was an actual case, I guess he's referring to, that sounded like was the genesis of the legislation. That particular incident set aside for a minute, is, in your opinion, based on the hundreds of them that you receive on an annual basis, these applications for, or these erosion settlement control plans, how many of them, in your opinion, are really flagrant, violations where it's just somebody that just says, you know what, the heck with it, I'm not going to do what I think I need to do, and how much of it is, hey, we thought we, built the plan right, the county approved it, we thought we put in what we were supposed to put in and it failed, and or there was a giant rain event and it failed. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what percentage of the universe we're actually talking about dealing with this particular bill if it was to pass.
Projects that where it's a deliberate violation or, horrendous violation, whatever adjectives you just used,
sure.
Very few. I don't have a number to put on it, but it's very few. The job that Councilman Trumbauer is talking about, I'm very well aware of. That actually wasn't due to a contractor's irresponsibility. It was a failed plan. And with that, and then with the record storms that we had this year, it exasperated it greatly.
And are the plans, I'm assuming that the plans are submitted as part of their process and they're approved at some level by the county?
They're approved by the county, they're approved by the Soil Conservation District, et cetera. There were some elements of that. That was the former property had a pipe that no one knew about that ran out directly to a waterway.
Right.
And it was taking underground water and from the development and carrying it out. Once that was found, things started getting under control, but no one was aware it was there.
Right. So, I mean, I guess that particular job aside, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, it seems to me, based on what I've seen in my years of service here at the county, that, this does seem to be a rare, occurrence. And if somebody's crafting a plan and submitting it to us for approval, is there a way for us to set another like a higher standard of what those plans should include to prevent this from happening? Like, in our review of those plans, are we allowed to go back to them and say, well, we don't really think, what you've laid out is sufficient? Do we have the flexibility to do that?
we have the flexibility to certainly try. You're hitting a bigger issue, which I think all of us as a group are going to have to look at one day, because the storm intensities seem to be picking up.
Right.
And what was a 10-year storm is now our 2-year storm for the last 2 years.
2 months storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, July was like 2 weeks.
But, you know, using this summer was just...
That's brutal.
It was just records.
Yeah.
And if I can add something, the worst violations we see, there's no plan. People just do it. And that's not uncommon. The worst violations we see are when they've never sought county permission to do the grading work and just undertake it, and we've discovered it, or it's been reported as a violation.
And are they subject to just this fine, or are they subject to lots of other fines too as a result of that?
Well, no, I mean, that's a grading violation. I mean, it's basically going to be this type of a violation.
Got it.
Now, they would be required to go to abate it. They'd have to go and get a plan and do whatever is required under the plan to abate the violation.
And we set the rules for abatement.
Oh, yes.
Essentially, it's the ball's in our court.
Correct.
Got it. And so that could cost them thousands of dollars to do that.
Yes.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Then we'll open the public hearing then on Bill number 9618. Anybody would like to testify on Bill 9618, please come down at this time. Please come forward.
Hi there, Laura Kilman from Annapolis. I support this bill.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
the
Cullen.
best testimony I've heard in my years.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay. Then we will now close the public hearing on Bill number 9618. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9618.
Bill number 9618, an ordinance concerning floodplain management, erosion and sediment control, and stormwater management,
Thank you.
civil fines.
Any final discussion, any final thoughts? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9618.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Nay.
Mr. Smith.
Nay.
Mr. Peruka.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Bill number 9618 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Bill number 9718.
Excuse me. Bill number 9718, an ordinance concerning zoning, conditional uses, farm breweries.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you'll recall, back in the 2015 timeframe, not too long after we were in our term, entered into our term here on the council, we passed a bill related to allowing breweries in certain zoning categories. And through that process, we worked with a number of folks in the community that were interested potentially in starting and opening up a farm brewery. Since that bill has passed, we have had no one move forward with an application in that process. So some of the folks that are in the agricultural community, in particular folks that have served on the Agricultural Farming and Agritourism Committee that was established by the county executive, decided to take a look at this because not only have I received a few calls since the original bill passed about the regulations that we put in place on establishing a farm brewery, but there's been discussion amongst this work group as well. And the discussion has included other folks outside of the work group, and they came up with some suggestions that they would like to see made to the zoning code that we set up, in particular with regards to farm breweries and the ingredients which are spelled out in this bill. So there are at least 2 individuals that I'm aware of that are very interested in seeing this particular piece of legislation passed and are interested in pursuing a brewery should we make the changes that are suggested in this bill. And so I would ask for your support and a vote on 9718.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Marzick?
Mr. Chair, members of Council, Bernie Marzick, the County Executive's Office. We've been to the table Lori Rhodes from Planning and Zoning, Greg Swain from the Office of Law. We support the bill. And you should have been provided a letter from the Agricultural Commission in support of the bill as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other discussion before the public hearing? We'll now open the public hearing on Bill number 9718. Anybody who'd like to testify on Bill number 9718, please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we will close the public hearing on Bill number 9718. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 9718.
Bill number 9718, an ordinance concerning zoning conditional uses, farm breweries.
Thank you. Any last discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 9718.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill 9718 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Resolution 3618.
Resolution 3618, resolution approving the purchase of real property consisting of approximately 71.80 acres, known as 8553 Elevation Road, Millersville, Maryland, 21108, from 5 Pumphrey's Partnership LLC, utilizing funds from the Advanced Land Acquisition Project.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, Bernie Marzick, County Executive's Office. With me at the table, Nancy Phelps, excuse me, Nancy Duden. Nancy Phelps. Sorry about that, Nancy Duden from the Office of Law, Chris Phipps from Public Works, Tom Burke from Public Works, Alex Shikdovich from Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and Rick Anthony from Rec and Parks. Resolution 3618 approves the acquisition of the Pumphrey property using funds from the Advanced Land Acquisition Capital Project. Council will remember we had money put into the budget this past year and then subsequently passed legislation that laid out the process for spending those funds on land purchases in the county. This property will be used to build an elementary school and a park that will connect to the B&A Trail. You all have the feasibility study, which lays out the schematic for this project. The property is located in Mr. Grasso's district, and again, we discussed this during the budget. This was one of the projects that was included for the Advanced Land Acquisition Fund. We also provided you with the environmental study that is required by the code. We'd be happy to answer any questions the council has.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Any questions from the council?
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Pruski.
I have a question for Mr. Shaknovich. So the mere fact that we're heading down this new path with the advanced land acquisition, some of these items are not in the MGT study. And as you know, that process is supposed to be apolitical. Certainly, I'm all for buying land and have no issues with schools, but I've been attending the Crofton redistricting meetings, and there's absolutely no plans for an elementary or middle school in the area. And regardless of whether Crofton High School is going to be built, it's going to be overcrowded with other schools. So I just hope you can comment on how this fits in with the school board's vision with the MGT study, and also what are the plans to add schools in West County?
Certainly. For the record, Alex Shakno, Chief Operating Officer. I think this fits in nicely with the envisioning of our future. We don't have any land holdings in the central or north central part of the county, either directly that are vacant or parcels large enough to support a second structure on them, especially taking into account things like the BWI noise exclusion zone, et cetera. As you know, we had a piece of property there for many years, and we converted it over, allowed Rec and Parks to take ownership of it and use it as Southgate Park, and they successfully did use it as Southgate Park for many years, and it was a wonderful asset to the community rather than sitting fallow unused by any of the citizenry, given that the taxpayers had already paid for it. But as part of our old mill plan, we have to now take back that Southgate property, Southgate Park property that we once owned, that the county does, so that we can construct the Old Mill Middle School South facility that will disadvantage the residents there because they'll have no access to that entire parcel during the window of construction. And again, I said there's no other parcel around that area that we own. With respect to the Crofton situation, we have been in ongoing dialogue that is identified as an area where we need at least another elementary school in the board's adopted capital improvement plan. We do have contemplated a West County elementary school that's slated, in our estimation, to be west of, somewhere west of Route 301, somewhere south of Watt Chapel Road. So somewhere around the southern reaches of Piney Orchard down into Crofton Elementary School's current zone. So we do, in fact, contemplate a elementary school going there, and we have been actively pursuing a site with that. With respect to the western reaches of the county, I've got two comments. One, with the construction of the Old Mill West School that is on the piece of property that the county government now owns. You and I may know it as Papa John's Farm. That will provide some relief to the easternmost boundary of West County. In the capital improvement program that the Board of Education just adopted in September, and later on this evening, you'll have Mr. Hammond and I and Mr. Marzik before you seek and support. We do have a new project called West County High School. And West County High School is a school that we have contemplated situated to the west of what will be the westernmost boundary of Old Mill West. I know I've used that word many times. So I think this piece of property here, the one that's before you as part of this resolution, is not in our 6-year plan. But with the amount of growth and construction that's occurring along the Route 100 corridor, east of the hospital, and down Route 10, that by the time we get to the next MGT study, there likely may be a recommendation for another school. The most adjacent school is Southgate Elementary School. Southgate Elementary School today is already over 100 students over the state rated capacity. It will be more than 200 students over the state rated capacity, and the other schools in that area have already been added onto and are pushing their bounds. So by the time we get to the next planning period, because the current MGT study carried us from 2015 to 2025. So the next study, be it by MGT or somebody else, will take that planning period past 2025, and I would suspect that in all likelihood we'll need an elementary school in that part of the county. We don't have any assets, and quite honestly, properties that are buildable or developable to the extent that they can support a structure as large as a school are few and far in between and really diminishing each and every day. I think that this provides a wonderful opportunity that Recon Parks and the citizens can recover the asset that they lost at Southgate Park. They can use it as a park for the next decade, 2 decades together. We've had conversations with Public Works and Recon Parks so we can master plan this property such that even where the school would be, it could be additional fields. And as long as we plan it judiciously, and Mr. Phipps and I are on the same page as is Mr. Anthony, we will be very careful to not put any expensive assets there. So we wouldn't put things like concession stands, bathrooms. We'll be careful where utilities go, et cetera, such that at some future point, we won't have to undo very expensive infrastructure. So I think this property can support both the near and long-term visions of the county.
Okay, thank you. Then one follow-up question. This site, and I want it for the record, will not be used for the Old Mill High School and switching the current slated property at Papa John's Farms, correct?
This property, in our estimation, in our plan that was adopted by our board and is laid out in the CIP, this piece of property has nothing to do with the Old Mill viability study and master plan that we have in place.
Okay, and the administration agrees with that? Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pruski. Anything further? Any other questions? If not, we will open up the public hearing on Resolution 3618. If anybody would like to testify on 3618, please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing on Resolution number 3618. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution number 3618.
Resolution number 3618, resolution approving the purchase of real property consisting of approximately 71.80 acres known as 8353 Elevation Road, Millersville, Maryland, 21108 from 5 Humphreys Partnership, LLC, utilizing funds from the Advanced Land Acquisition Capital Project.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any final discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Resolution number 3618.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Peruka.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Resolution number 3618 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of Resolution number 3718.
Resolution number 3718, resolution approving the nomination of Billy Penley as acting health officer.
Thank you, Mr. Marzik.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzik in the County Executive's Office. As you know, Fran Phillips went back to work with the State Department of Health. This resolution approves Billy Penley to serve as the acting health officer through February 28th, 2019. Ms. Penley previously served as the County Budget Office as well as the Department of Health's Chief Financial Officer. We ask for your support of this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple questions.
Mr.
Mr. Marzick, usually we get resumes of folks who are appointed. I didn't see anything here. Did it not, something wasn't submitted, or?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head.
I mean, here's the real crux. First of all, Ms. Penley's very well-educated, has things. My concern is the health department having someone who has a medical background. I don't know what, she has in terms of, is she a nurse? Does she have any?
She's got an MBA, I know that. I guess maybe we can ask Ms. Penley. Maybe she has a resume with her.
Yeah.
I apologize. I thought this was provided to council.
And then I guess the other question I have in regards to David Rose, he's the deputy. I mean, I don't understand the chain of command in the health department. Honestly, I don't know how that works, but was he not asked, or was somebody else, or what's the rationale? I mean, I'm just curious.
The rationale for?
I mean, Ms. Penley was just chosen by the county executive? Was there?
Yes, in an acting role, when Dr. Rose is the deputy in the department, as he's been a deputy in the department. We have, I want to get back to your first question regarding the health. I believe under state law, you're required to have either the deputy or the director to be from a medical profession. Ms. Phillips obviously was a nurse. Dr. Rose is obviously a medical doctor. There are, I believe, 3 other jurisdictions in the state that have non-medical professionals leading their health departments right now. And they have the deputies as the medical professionals. But I'll let Ms. Penley kind of give her background as to education for that.
Billy Penley, Acting Health Officer. I have been with the county government for almost 25 years. I started out my career in the Office of Finance and moved to the County Budget Officer and then joined the Department of Health staff. So before I joined the Department of Health staff, I was their budget analyst and started to learn the programs. Since I've been at the Department of Health, I've gotten more involved in their programs out there. As being the fiscal person, I've had the opportunity to learn all the programs out there and get involved with the folks in building their budgets. To go back to the other health officers for the state of Maryland, there are 23 people serving as health officers for the 24 local health districts. Of those 20 are health officials. One has 2. There's Somerset and Wycomico counties that are sharing a health officer because Somerset is having a terrible time in recruiting a health officer. But there are 3 acting health officers in the state of Maryland. All 3 of us do not have a medical background. There are 11 medical directors, 3 are nurses, 8 are Masters of Public Health, Masters of Health, and Environmental degrees as health officers. All 20 of those have more than 1 degree. The only requirement is that as long as one of the top 2, meaning the health officer or deputy health officer, has a medical degree, and that would be Dr. Rose.
Okay, and this might not be for you, Ms. Penley, but Mr. Marzick, just real quick, is this something permanent that we're looking toward, or just acting? How long? I mean, are we interviewing?
We are. We just received, or personnel just received a list of potential candidates from the state. This position has been open since Ms. Phillips moved to the state. So the state health department forwards names to the county personnel. They're going to set up a panel to start interviewing these candidates, and ideally we have this done in the next few weeks to find someone to fill that spot on a permanent basis. But no, this is just an acting position.
Okay. And again, this is my only opportunity, Ms. Penley, so you have to understand, but do you have a position on privatizing school nurses?
We have no plans to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Ms. Penley, one quick question. I know the report for the bullying was just submitted today, and obviously we didn't get a chance to read it. Can I get a confirmation from you or your staff that someone will reach out in the next 2 weeks or so just to go over a summary of what you envision? I know there was a couple of steps in there that talked about what's going forward, but how was the county going to actually implement that going forward? That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yes, I fully envisioned that, and I expected you to ask that, and it was proper to ask that absolutely. We will meet with you, any other council members as Board of Health capacity to sit down and meet with you and go over the bullying report.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? If not, we'll open the public hearing on resolution number 3718. Is there anybody who would like to testify on resolution 3718? Please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we will now close the public hearing on resolution number 3718. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 3718.
Resolution number 3718, resolution approving the nomination of Billy Penley as acting health officer.
Any final discussion? If not, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 3718.
Mr. Grasso.
Yay.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Pruka.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution 3718 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 3818.
Resolution number 3818, resolution supporting the Anne Arundel County Board of Education's fiscal year 2020 public school construction capital improvement program request for submission to the Interagency Committee on School Construction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Marzick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Bernie Marzick at the County Executive's Office. With me at the table, Alex Sheknovich from Anne Arundel County Public Schools, John Hammond, Budget Officer, and Lori Blair Klossmeyer from the Office of Law. Resolution 3818 confirms the County Executive's support and the letter of support for the fiscal year 2020 school construction capital improvement program request of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education for submission to the Interagency Committee on School Construction. A copy of the letter and support should be in front of you. This is an annual process. The Interagency Committee requires a written letter of support from the local government upon submission. This letter needs to be submitted to the IAC no later than November 27th. We ask for your support of this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Marzick. Any questions? Mr. Pruski.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, real quick, Mr. Sheknovich, I wanted to ask you, you're aware the Odenton Town Center Boulevard just opened. They're starting to build townhomes. My predecessors obviously had an agreement that they're exempt from adequate facilities. Do we have a plan to address that issue?
For the record, Alex Chapman, Chief Operating Officer. Yes, I am aware that it's open. I drove over it Thursday of this past week, so I saw it. So we do not at present have a piece of property there. We've expanded selectively to schools around that area. We're aware of the development. Obviously, we receive information and data from Mr. Hager's office on a routine basis. So we know that the potential build out for there will be more units there that we can currently service. We're currently looking at expanding to Seven Oaks Elementary School. That is one of the schools that has not had an addition onto it. Unlike Odenton, that you're aware, we just put a 2-story addition. So it is not in this year's capital improvement plan, but likely in the very near, i.e. next year, or the year after, we're going to be looking at putting a classroom addition onto Seven Oaks as a stopgap while we more comprehensively look at the entire area that's at the elementary school. We're actually okay in the middle school right now. We hope that the West County High School that I alluded to earlier, that is in the board's out-year CIP, will help us address some of the high school pressures in that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further? If not, we will open the public hearing on resolution number 3818. There's no one signed up, but if anybody would like to testify on resolution number 3818, please come down at this time. Seeing no movement, we'll close the public hearing on resolution 3818. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 3818.
Resolution number 3818, resolution supporting the Anne Arundel County Board of Education's fiscal year 2020 public school construction capital improvement program request for submission to the Interagency Committee on School Construction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there any final discussion? Mr. Hammond, did you have anything to add, sir?
No.
No final words of wisdom. You're looking very snappy this evening, sir.
I just, in the spirit of this meeting, which I think it's going to denigrate into, I want to get in first. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with you all for 4 years, and I think I only got 2 more council meetings myself before I walk out the door, so good luck to you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on on resolution number 3818.
Mr. Grasso.
Aye.
Mr. Fink.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Mr. Trumbauer.
Aye.
Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Pruka.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Resolution number 3818 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there any other business before Mr. Fink offers a motion to
Mr.
adjourn?
Chair.
Is there any other business to be brought before the council? Mr. Walker.
I'm sure there's going to be some other folks who want to say things, but I do want to say something, but I also would like to, my request would be that I have the last word, if you don't mind.
Wow. I'm not sure I don't mind.
I'm sure you won't when you hear what I have to say.
All right.
So.
I appreciate that.
But can I start off with my own comment?
You're going to have the first and the last word? Is it?
Thank you very much. That's what I was looking for.
That's it.
I appreciate that. I just want to say it has been a pleasure and an honor serving with each of you on the council. I do want to especially thank our staff, Joanne and her team of folks in the back do a fantastic job for us making all the trains run on time. And I especially want to thank my legislative aide, Pam Scarborough, who has been with me since my very first council meeting 8 years ago. When I was a freshman councilman with no experience, and even though I'd attended meetings, you still don't fully understand the role that you're stepping into when you're elected to office. And she has been by my side from the beginning. She has been there as a coach, as a cheerleader, as a protector, a mother bear, I like to say, and has helped me, guided me, supported me, worked for our constituents, most importantly, and I could not have served this last 8 years without her, so I do want to publicly thank her. And finally, I want to thank the auditor, on all of the auditors that we've worked with over the past 8 years as well, and her staff. Thank you very much for your service to us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Smith? Anybody else? Mr. Grasso?
Well, I guess I will say something. No, it's just to sort of ring out the bell, and I think the most important thing that we've done here, as the seven of us, is, as well as the staff, is there is an institution that we have been upholding. And so we may not have agreed on a lot of different legislation or had the same votes, but I think the spirit of us sort of carrying the water for the county for the last 4 years is what democracy is all about. And so to Ms. Linda, and I'll probably have some words for her later this month as well, or next month, just that when this term expires. But she too has been a blessing to me, and I'm just grateful that the almost 5.5, 6 years that I've been in this capacity, that she's been there, and thank the staff for keeping us in line. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Grasso?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think I was a little wiser than most of us because I made sure there was people here that got to hear what we got to say. So with that being said, I definitely want to thank Rose Brooks, because I tell you what, when Ed Middlebrooks passed her over to me, he said, you're getting a powerhouse with her, and she's like a living, walking archive of Anne Arundel County and the state government. You can find everything out from her. So she's been a real champ, and Joanne and the rest, and Amy and Laura and everybody in the back over there have dealt with me through a lot of trying moments, and I appreciate your patience with me because I'm not the most easy person to get along, even though I mean well.
That's not the rumor, John.
Yeah, but that's pretty much what I'm going to say. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Grasso. Mr. Fink?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too just want to lay on the, what an honor it's been over the last 8 years to represent the community that I grew up in Pasadena. I think as a council, we've done a lot in this county. I'm glad I've been part of it. You all have certainly helped make Pasadena a better place, and I'm sure you're proud of that, between the fire stations and the addition to the mountain road we did, and the police station, the school, playgrounds.
Boat ramps.
The what?
Boat ramps.
Boat ramps, first public boat ramp. We did a lot in Pasadena we can all be very, very proud of. And I know my son Owen and Kyle and my wife Kristen are watching right now. It's probably the first time they watched, but they've been waiting for me to come home tonight, knowing that this is probably it for us. So I just want to say thank you to them, because as we all know, it's a lot of time away from our families serving on the council, not just on Monday nights, but throughout the month, attending events and whatnot. So thank you to them and to everybody in Pasadena that's allowed me to serve for the last 8 years on this council. And I just want to end off with just one question. I've sat next to John Grasso now for the better part of 8 years. And, every time I look over, he's playing on this weird looking thing. And I've never, ever known what the heck it is. John, what is this? What is it? I mean, he hits a 2 3 times to get a letter, and a 4 3 times to get another letter. What the heck is it?
A cheap Acadel $15 phone that fits right in my pocket. Well, you got that whatever flat screen TV that you push on all the time.
Mr. Chair, this is just a funny thing. The most memorable thing that I think all of us will miss is every time you call, last call for folks to come up, my eyeballs look to the left, and I look for this crutch from Ms. Julie Johnson, who's sitting in the back. And so she's been as much a part of this council for the last 4 years as I think any of us have been up here. So we'll miss that. So thank you.
Post Office Box 6634.
Yeah, we're starting to know it by heart.
Right. And Mr. Enright back there in that same row has been a offered very cogent comments, and we appreciate him doing his civic duty. Mr. Prisky?
He's coming back.
Thank you, Mr. Prisky.
No comment. I just want to thank everybody for serving. I've actually learned a lot from those that have been here, and I certainly appreciate the staff. And regardless of what happens, we're here to do our best in what we do, and thank you for everyone for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Prisky. Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mary, Johnny, and Josie, I'll be home soon.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. I do have a brief remarks that I'd just like to read, just to take a minute. During the course of this 4-year term, this council has considered, debated, and discussed and voted on more than 300, maybe close to 400, separate pieces of legislation ranging over a variety of issues. And how each of us has voted on those issues is a matter of public record, but in many cases, why we voted the way we did has not always been fully explained. To be sure, some of us have taken a moment and explained our vote in some cases. Mr. Walker's going to explain all of his when he has the last word here. But we haven't done that in any consistent or methodical way. And of course, in many cases, explanation was not necessary because none was necessary in light of the circumstances, or it was obvious. But when I began this term, I committed to a set of 10 questions that I would ask and answer with regard to the matters that came before us. And the questions formed a template that I've tried to follow in my decision-making process, and I hope would be both transparent and consistent. And I published these on a website called Perutka Town Hall under the title Legislative Reviews. And while time didn't allow me to publish an explanation of each vote, I tried to provide a representative sample that would serve as an apologetic for my seeking and serving in this office. So before this term is completed, we have another few weeks left. By the end of November, I'm hoping to have published on the website about 30 to 35 legislative reviews, which I hope to be representative sample of the issues which have come before this body and be helpful to anyone who might be interested in this background. For my part, I wish to thank my colleagues. I wish to thank my wife, Natalie. I wish to thank my legislative aide, Phil Reeder. I'd like to offer my very warmest thanks to Madam Secretary Joanne Gray and the council staff, our legal counsel, Amy Tate, the counsel to the council, County Executive Steve Shue, Bertie Marzak from the County Executive's Office, our County Auditor, Phyllis Clancy, and the other auditors that have preceded her, and all those who have come and testified before us, and of course the citizens of District 5. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the Capital Gazette for their faithful coverage of these proceedings. Thank you for your diligent work. I also would like to acknowledge and thank the Anne Arundel County Police and Chief Tim Altemeyer for their diligent efforts to assure our safety in this chamber and in this county. We also, I should thank the Fire Chief Alan Graves and the Fire Marshal. It's been an honor to be associated with this body and to serve the people of Anne Arundel County, and I thank God for the opportunity that His providence has ordained. So thank you very, very much. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Peruka. As you know, each year when we transfer the chairmanship from one person to the next, it is our custom to offer a plaque to the outgoing chairperson to honor their year of service with the gavel. And so that is here prepared for you with the dates that you served as chairman of the Anne Arundel County Council. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. With that, Mr. Fink, I think I will entertain your motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.